to another episode of On Scene with RCSO. Today we have a dynamic duo with us today. We have Sergeant Kyle Gould with the Gang Task Force, and we have Assistant Attorney MacKenzie Gray. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Well, what we want to do today, we've had a few shows. We talked to juvenile court judge on last week, and we were talking about some juvenile issues that they're having. And one of the things that came up was gangs or kids that are kind of unsupervised, and they kind of go to, I won't say the dark side, but kind of illegal activities. And one thing that we know and parents try to call us and talk to us about is they have concerns that their kids are going to join gangs. Or somebody just kind of talk to us about what gangs are, what does that mean, things that, parents can look out for. Y'all are the experts in this field, so just shoot.
Do you want to cover the legal definition of what a gang is?
Why don't you start with the non-legal, and we'll go from there.
Criminal street gangs are usually comprised of like three or more people just conducting illicit illegal acts. That is the basic, simplest definition of a criminal street gang. And
so legally, like you said, it is three or more people, and you can call it a group because gangs can be a wide variety of things. They can be anywhere from motorcycles to Bloods, Crips, any of that. Motorcycle gangs will not call themselves a gang. They call themselves a club, but they are still a gang. But it's three or more people committing acts together in furtherance of the gang, which is what makes a violation. That would make the violation of the gang. It's not illegal to be in a gang. But for parents to look out for, look at changes in your kids' behavior. A lot of kids go and they see it as like a family, especially for kids who don't have a great home life. They see it as an inclusion. It's somewhere they can feel like they have a family. And that is why the older gang members are looking, they're starting to recruit in elementary school now. So teachers need to start looking. And I know that my office can do trainings for the school board and teachers, and along with the sheriff's office. We can do a combined one that teaches teachers and parents what to look out for, especially in the younger kids, to see if there might be being influenced by older.
Okay. And kind of explain what your office does and your role there.
So I work for the Attorney General's office. We do a wide array of things, from anywhere from elections all the way through civils, human trafficking, and gangs, along with a variety of other things. However, the gang unit is the newest unit. So a few years back, they started with the human trafficking unit. We've now, just over a year ago, started the gang unit. It gives us jurisdiction, concurrent jurisdiction with the DA's offices to work gangs in the state of Georgia. We're actually right now working with a bunch of DA's offices, and we're not there, to take over or anything. We're there to help aid, because I know that a lot of resources are needed for when it comes to gangs. So we're there to aid sheriff's offices. We're there to aid DA's offices and either prosecute a case or help them prosecute a case, get the resources that they need. And we're there to be in the communities. My office is in Atlanta, but I'm actually based out of Augusta. So Chris, my boss, Chris Carr, when he hired Kara, they actually did, they put us in satellite type offices so that way we can have a better reach around the state to help out the entire state of Georgia, rather than just be focused in Atlanta, because places like Savannah, Augusta, and Columbus, and smaller towns have a gang problem, and we can't just focus on Atlanta.
And touching on that, specific to our area, a lot of times when people define gangs, they're looking at Bloods and Crips. What are some of the gangs that we see in our specific area, or that, we look at things like, the shoes being thrown over the power line? Those are what we've heard. Are those myths? Because a lot of people look at things like that. They see something spray painted somewhere. What are other indicators that the community can be looking for to see if gangs are in their area? We've talked about hybrid gangs for a lot of communities, that neighborhood associations. They want to know what they need to be looking for, because their definition of a gang is always, Blood or Crip. They don't understand that there are subsets and things of that nature. I
think the biggest issue that we deal with in Richmond County is actually, it's not nationally recognized criminal street gangs. Right. It's a conglomerate. It's actually hybrid criminal street gangs, and it's easier for a single, just a parent to identify, if their children might be, their child or, a friend or a family member might be associated with a criminal street gang easier than a group of people, say like a neighborhood association looking in. And the reason it's actually more difficult for, say, like the neighborhood association, because they see things like, tagging, like graffiti tagging.
Right.
That's an easy indicator if it's easily recognizable. But parents, individual parents, they see things, they're more in tune with their child's lives. They might see something which we call like social media tagging. Their child's like Facebook or Instagram, which would indicate that they're part of maybe a hybrid criminal street gang here locally. So there's different things to look for, like I said, as opposed to if you're a group on the outside looking in, you have to look for different things. So like like we go back, the graffiti tagging, or you'll see a specific group of people like hanging out in a specific area, and where that area is prone to criminal activity. So that's easy to see. That's easier for that group to see. It's harder for that outside group looking in to see like, hey, this child, this 15-year-old, this 16-year-old, they're doing emoji tagging, or they're saying things that relate to the hybrid criminal street gang on their social media or something like that.
Okay.
So there is a difference, like I said, to what to look for. Parents are obviously more in tune with their child's lives. They're closer. They can see things that, like I said, an outside group can't.
And going back to what you said, you talked about it's not illegal to be in a gang, and that's what I think we have to push that educational piece to people, because they're like, it's a gang, and how they define it as a gang. But touching back on what you said was that it's the acts that
Correct.
they commit in furtherance of the gang. If you can kind of elaborate on that, because a lot of times people think that, they're a gang, they're identifying these individuals as gangs, and they want to know why we aren't arresting them, because they say they're a gang and they want us to arrest them. But educating our community really on what we have to do. We have to establish guidelines. We have things in place in order to make sure that we're not just arresting people because of what they want. They're gang members. We want them out of our neighborhoods.
Right. And, like I said, it's not illegal to be in a gang. It's not illegal to hang out with your friends. However, it's when you start committing acts that are in furtherance of that gang to induce fear or to make money. And that gangs are about money and fear. That's what they're about. And they're recruiting younger kids because of the statutes. You don't get in trouble as much as a kid, and so they're getting these older guys are getting kids to commit these crimes for them or carry the guns. I remember a case that I worked not too long ago where they had a fourth grader bringing the gun to school to give to a high school student so they could go commit a shooting later. And it wasn't in Augusta, but it was close to the area. But you have to look for that because it's not illegal for them to hang out with it, but they're looking for that inclusion. But it's once they start committing those acts. So you're not going to be in trouble for just hanging out with your friends. But if you start committing crimes for that reason, then yes.
Now I was going to ask you about that because you said elementary school. And, we look at those as our babies. So we can't, I can't even fathom like what you just said, somebody getting a fourth grader to carry a gun so they can go and shoot somebody at a high school.
Right.
Is that something you're seeing? Because we're seeing teenagers being arrested, too, for these gun charges or these gun crimes and violent crimes. Is that something that you believe the older individuals are having them do?
Yes.
Or,
and I don't necessarily mean, when I say older, I don't necessarily mean 40s, 50s. I mean like late 20s, early 30s, because when you think about it, the juvenile statute, it's more of a rehabilitation than a prosecution. And they know that. So if they can get somebody under the age of 17 to claim the gun for them or do the shooting or carry the dope, they're not going to get in as much trouble unless they've got obviously a long history and it comes up, or they cross that 7 deadly. They're recruiting in elementary school, which is why that new statute was just passed, that it is an enhancement for recruiting, and that is targeted at mostly for adults who are recruiting kids into the gang. I mean, it's for recruiting anybody, but we're trying to protect our youth with this, and we don't want to see, once you're in that life, for the most part, you're in that life unless you can find a way to get out, and the longer we can protect them, the better.
So what is that statute? I told you at the beginning of this,
Yes.
Gangs is not my thing.
Right.
So can you talk about that just a little bit?
So the criminal street gang statute has several, which makes it illegal to commit acts in the gangs. There's several different violations underneath it. There are ones for the act itself, ones to maintain or increase your status, ones for theft of property, ones for intimidating witnesses or prosecutors or cops or judges or jurors. There's ones for intimidating people to get out of the gang. But there's also now a new one that allows, under 1615.4, it allows an enhancement of punishment for people who recruit somebody into the gang.
Okay.
And while it's for anybody, it was established to try to protect our youth as much as possible, because we are seeing them recruited at such a young age. And I know Sergeant Gould probably sees it way more than I do because he's involved in it every single day. He's in and out on, he works on the streets. He's in the office seeing it, our office does start things from the beginning, but we also see it on the back end, and not everybody's arrested, so he sees it more, I know.
What kind of things are you seeing? How long have you been in the gang unit first?
I've been in the gang unit for just a little over a year now in Richmond County. I've actually been a part of the Safe Streets Gang Task Force that's headed by the FBI out of Augusta for probably maybe about 3.5, 4 years now, somewhere in that area. So we do see a lot of juvenile participation in criminal street gangs. Like I said, we go back. I mean, we'll just talk about like recent events. We had a shooting recently at a school. All right, between two people. Now, and I'm not exactly familiar what the motive was that spurred the fight that ended, in a shooting. But I mean, I can say with certainty that there is some criminal street gang relation to both of those subjects that were involved. So like I said, that's something in our school that, I mean, that was what was that, like 2-3 weeks ago? I mean, that wasn't even that long ago.
It wasn't that long.
And that was
3 weeks into school starting.
that happened between two children, so, and we've seen, I mean, with these, the rash of violence that we've seen recently, 15-year-olds getting killed by, 15, 16, 17-year-olds, with both sides having some participation in, some criminal street gangs here locally in Augusta. So it seems to be, moving to the younger crowd more and more and more. So it's good that we now have some kind of updated laws that specifically target these recruiters and enhancements that target these leaders, especially. So,
and one thing to look for, because you see these juveniles committing these acts, the guns they're stolen guns. You'll see a lot of juveniles committing entering autos. If you're seeing a rash of entering autos, they're looking for guns. Like you'll see people be like, oh, my car was broken into and the only thing missing is my gun. Money's there, purses are there, jewelry. They want guns because if they're stolen, they can't be traced back to them. They don't want to obtain guns legally. They want to do it illegally. And, we are trying to protect our kids, but kids are dangerous. Not only because they, with guns, but they don't know what they're doing. They're young. They're not fully developed. They don't know how to shoot. They're not trained on it. And the community is the ones that are getting harmed too, because people will say, oh, well, they're shooting at, no, they might be shooting at each other. Number one, we still have to protect no matter who they are. But they're hitting innocent people.
Right.
They're shooting into innocent houses. And they're going wild because kids believe they're untouchable. And that's why the older crowd is getting the younger crowd to do crimes as well, because they believe juveniles are untouchable. And so while, yes, kids need some rehabilitation, at some point there has to be a punishment too, because you cannot be willy-nilly with the guns and violence and think that it's okay and nothing's going to happen to you. And that is terrifying for the gang or the community as a whole because of gangs, because juveniles, they feel like they can't be touched. Older crowds feel like juveniles can't be touched, and they're committing these shootings and they're injuring innocent people, killing innocent people, shooting into houses and making people feel unsafe in their homes.
Right.
And it's not, like I said, not just juveniles. Adults are doing it too, but they're also encouraging it more.
And that's one thing that we always talk about at the beginning of the show is our 9 p.m. routine. Lock your cars, get your guns out of your cars, take your valuables out, because we know, especially in the apartment complexes, those are big, or, neighborhoods that have a lot of units in them. They just go and try doors. And if you just so happen to not lock your door, secure your door, and forget your guns in there, or they have it. That and how much ammunition you have in there, they're getting all of that stuff. So that's why we try to encourage people, like, you have to help us prevent this, or as much as you can, because we know that, it's the guns, and they're being used in multiple crimes.
Right.
So it's not just one, and then they're done, or it's multiple until they're done with it, and then they kind of discard it or hide it or whatever. But you have to help us by doing that. Just one little simple thing.
Right.
Will lock your car door.
Well, and I think Kyle probably can talk better about this, but I have seen in areas that I've been in that if the door's locked, they'll pull in it and they'll let it go, not really breaking in. But I don't know if that's the same in Richmond County as much as it is in some of the smaller counties that I have been in.
I would say that a lot of our entering autos where they actually obtain some property are from unsecured vehicles.
And I can attest to that as well, because what we've seen as of recently, I think as of earlier this week, we had an incident where in a neighborhood where there was a gentleman that was walking around pulling on doors. No one called the sheriff's office. A gentleman happened to look out his window, saw this young man, saw him with a gun, went back inside, retrieved his personal gun, and he did end up shooting that individual. Well, the neighbors in the community said they had saw that gentleman walking through the neighborhood pulling on car doors.
Right.
I think in the neighboring county, we just had the guy arrested because he was walking around pulling on door handles in an apartment complex.
And I know when I was at the DA's office a few years back before I went to the AG's office and everything, there was something called I think it was See Something, Say Something app that had or anything like that. But, I mean, just say something. Even if you feel like you're not being annoying to call law enforcement, like, hey, this is weird that I'm seeing this in my neighborhood. I mean, that's what Kyle and his unit and all the sheriff's office there for, just to check on the community and just call, make a report so it's there. And that helps me in court and Kyle when we're going back, seeing the trail of where this was coming from. And even if they're not arrested, it's still good to have something on file.
Right. And a lot of neighborhoods, they actually have, what I'm seeing is they'll have a neighborhood association Facebook page. If they see something, they're reporting it through the page. And everybody's like, well, I saw that too. But what we don't see is the follow through where they're contacting the sheriff's office and say, hey, we noticed this.
Right.
I mean, my thing is, most of these firearms cost a couple $100 a piece. Would you just take a couple $100 and leave it sitting in your center console for somebody to take in an unsecured vehicle? I know I wouldn't.
I would. Not $5.
No. I need gas nowadays. What you talking about?
And you mentioned when you were at the DA's office, and that's where I know you from, working the child sex crimes. And I believe when we were there, because you were there for a while, and I was at the CAC for a while, that kind of ages us just a little bit.
Well, we're going to talk about the aging.
But that was kind of the beginning of the whole trafficking movement.
Yes.
Where we were trying to have people pay attention or just kind of like, look, this is a problem, this is going on. And we found out that there is kind of a gang nexus to that, too.
Yes.
One of the things that we used to say is, drugs, that costs money. You have to buy those. But to traffic a child or an older female or whatever, that product never goes away.
Right.
You can reuse that over and over and over again. And I know you said that your office started with the trafficking movement and then it went into the gangs. Are you seeing that kind of?
Yes. So within the prosecution division in our office, at the AG's office, there is a unit for human trafficking and a unit for gangs. There's other units as well, but the human trafficking unit started first, and then the gang unit started second. And while technically we're two separate units, we actually do have several cases where we're working together because the office in Atlanta, the gang unit and the human trafficking unit are in the same building. Their offices are right next to each other. And there are several cases across the state where there are prosecutors from the human trafficking unit and from the gang unit prosecuting it together because of the overlap of gang members trafficking young girls, boys, and adult women because it's about the money and it's about that fear. And if they can make money, they're going to do it. And that's how they have control, too.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask, are you seeing that kind of in Augusta in this area too, or is that more bigger city stuff?
No, we do see it sometimes. I'd say it's a 50-50 chance if you can identify somebody that is essentially a prostitute. We'll call it, somebody, doing prostitution. It's a 50-50 chance that they are out there because somebody is forcing them to be out there. And sometimes that person does relate back, that alleged pimp, that so-called pimp, that sometimes that person does relate back to a criminal street gang. Sometimes they don't, though. So it's not like all-inclusive to gangs. It does, human trafficking occurs outside of the criminal street gang kind of realm, but like MacKenzie was saying, if they can make money on it, they're gonna do it. Like I said, if they can make money on human trafficking, drugs, committing fraud, stealing cars, it's just anything you can think of, they're going to do it.
And remember, there's 3 main ways that you can get into a gang, and one of them involves sex acts. And it's not, they're not necessarily taking them across the state or passing, but they are passing females around to admission into a gang, and that, that's trafficking as well, like, because they're sharing them with other people and doing what they want. And so, you don't need to necessarily look for, they're moving them across the state, they're being hidden in a basement somewhere. The things you see on TV, that's not reality. It's just not. And I mean, there is that, but that's not the only way this can happen. So,
and one thing that I think the community needs to know is that I see that's actually unique about gang statutes is that when you have someone that you are making that charge, when you get that predicate charge and you have the other charges, some people call it stacking, whatever, if you can elaborate to that.
yes.
Because I think that is unique about the gang statute is because you can have so many other offenses or charges that come under that.
So Georgia has the strongest gang statute in the country, and it's because it's literally called the Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act for a reason, because it is a form of terrorism, domestic-wise. It is terrorizing our youth. It's terrorizing our communities. There are so many deaths. Majority of the crimes in the state are gang-related or done by gang members. Not everyone gets a charge, but we have such a strong statute because our legislators want to protect, and our cops and our prosecutors want to protect our communities, and we cannot do that without the help of these laws. So they can't stack them, or however you want to say it. They call RICO, the Racketeering Act, the atomic bomb. But the gang statute is getting there as well, and you can combine the two because we're making an impression on the community and on these offenders that your acts will not be tolerated. So if you're charged with A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, each one of those is a 5 to 20, except for the recruitment statute is now a 10, minimum 10 instead of minimum 5 like the others. But you can add those together. So you could end up, if you're charged with, say, an aggravated assault, and you do it as a leader, and you get the gang charge, that's 60 years right there that you could get. And no, they don't get that every time, but the laws are there to protect our citizens and to deter this violence and deter gang act. It's not to, go after one group of people or anything like that. We are there to protect the community. The only way we can do that is with these laws.
Now, are there any myths that you have come across in your job where people think one thing but it's actually another when it comes to gangs?
Colin, you want to go first? Anything you see?
Myths?
Yeah.
I mean, okay, what about this? In Georgia, don't give me that face.
Go ahead.
In Georgia, they're not so much like Chicago and LA. It's not about colors and not like the nationally ranked gangs. Yes, we do them, but they're not about colors. They're about communities and the streets they grew up on, correct? Like the hybrids and stuff are more prominent, and you're not necessarily always looking for colors. You're looking more for the community or the street they grew up on and signs.
I mean, are you asking me that everybody with a bandana is a gang member?
No, because, I know they're not.
That might be a myth right there. Okay.
No,
but that
could
be.
A myth.
So now my
old farmer boy.
Yeah.
The guy, the poor guy working out there at Plant Vogel that just uses to wipe the sweat off his forehead.
No,
He's
I'm
not
saying
in a
people
gang.
think that you have to have like blood is only Bloods were red and only Crips were blue. That's not true, especially in Georgia.
That's not. I wouldn't really say that's a myth. That's more just like I think that's just an uneducated guess.
Right,
That's
but
what I'll call that.
It's still a myth, though. I mean, they do
I would say the myth. The whole. Oh, the guy's he's got a bandana. He's a gang member. No, that's a myth.
It is a myth, and I don't think that's
well,
true.
there you go. That is a myth. Yeah.
Poor construction workers out there just with their bandanas, and you're over here looking at what color bandana it is.
Look, I get the cases from y'all, so I know what you're talking about.
And on top of that, you have a lot of people that think that with our hybrid gangs, they're pretty fluid. Would you agree?
I
that
definitely would agree with that.
They will, one day you're claiming this, the next day you may be claiming something else. And with the rap music, we're not a gang. We're rappers. We're in a rap group.
Yeah, record label. Yeah,
Yes.
I've heard that.
We're going to the studio.
Yes.
Heard that a multitude of times, and that's fine. Like I said, if they're a record label, they're a rap label, music artist, that's fine. Well, I mean, if you're going to commit criminal acts in furtherance of that, record label, that with at least 3 people, I mean, that kind of changes the fact if it's a record label or not. So.
Well, and you'll see a lot of gangs using these record labels and groups to cover the affront for the gang.
Right.
And, it's not the music industry's fault because you've got, white collar crimes going on through people that create these companies that are doing it as a front as well. So it's just another avenue for crime. And they use it as a front. Oh, well, I'm legit because I've got it certified in Atlanta or something like that. But it's really just a front. Now, because there are real labels, there are real groups, but they are also being used. Some are also being used as fronts.
Now, I was going to ask about like everybody takes selfies now and they throw up the hand signs and stuff like that. Like, I know I've sent a couple to the gang task force when we're doing pre-employment searches and stuff like that. I'm like, is this somebody in a gang because they're throwing up like the peace sign and it looks weird and
their fingers a little crooked.
Yeah. So I believe that's another one of the myths. Like if I'm on Facebook and I see my kid always throwing up some kind of weird sign or something, like I believe that's kind of another myth, but something that could possibly be verified. Like how do I distinguish that from just them being silly and trying to be cute on social media?
That's tricky because I've looked at many pictures where people sometimes they just throw their hands up or they're putting their hand in there and it doesn't look like it. I mean, it appears the person with an untrained eye would be like, oh, that might be a hand sign to a criminal street gang. And then you look at it and they're throwing up a peace sign or, they got like 4 fingers up or something. You're like, oh, okay, or maybe they're waving to their mom or something. Yeah. But hand signs can be tricky. I said some are more recognizable than others. Mm-hmm. It would be hard for me to sit here in 30 minutes or an hour and explain every single hand sign that there is. And being honest, like I don't know every single hand sign. There's just so many of them and they're fluid. Like I said, things change. They change how they hold their hands. They change how they hold, if it's up or if it's down. I mean, things do change for these hybrid criminal street gangs. The nationally recognized criminal street gangs, like those are, a lot of those stay the same most of the time. It's pretty easy to recognize when somebody's trying to make a B with their fingers, or somebody's got, their fingers pointing up straight like this, like it's 2 guns, that things like that are easily recognizable. But, if somebody's spelling out like, LOE with their fingers, that's a little bit more trickier.
Takes a little practice.
Well, that and sometimes, the younger generation, they're not doing it right, and maybe the older guys are getting carpal tunnel and they can't do it as much anymore. That doesn't, if
shooting all those guns.
Yeah, well, trying to make all those weird things. My hands would be stuck like this if I was doing that all the time. But it depends. Like I said, don't assume just because somebody is putting their hands up in the air, or they have their hand a certain way that it's a gang sign. You can't do that. Goes back to the whole bandana thing.
I was about to say, are you just saying because somebody holds their hand up there?
No, I clarified that.
I
clarified that just because somebody puts their hands up or has a bandana.
What if they put their hand up and have a bandana?
That doesn't mean they're
I'm just checking with you because
doesn't mean they're in a gang.
Just gonna check with them. But
that puts the onus back on the parents as well.
Yeah,
when you see those things, you need to have those conversations with your kids.
Look for consistency in social media as well, because if you see it once, okay, you saw it once. But if you're seeing it every time they do something with their group of friends, the same hand sign or the same type of hand signs, maybe that's a clue. But if they're doing it once, twice, not necessarily a clue. Kind of perky ears, but kids are kids too sometimes, and just because they're doing something with their hands doesn't mean they're in a gang, or if they're wearing a certain shirt or clothing.
Like moving on from the bandana, now you're talking about T-shirts.
Just saying.
Why don't you open up a clothing store while you're here?
Look.
And I think what we're saying is it's just not one thing.
Right.
You have to look at the behavior too, because sometimes behaviors change, or groups of friends kind of change. So it's the totality, the bigger picture, not just that one little thing.
Right. And I'm going to tell you, teachers will notice it probably first.
Yeah, teachers and parents, every parent should be nosy about what their child is doing, who they're talking to, what they're doing on their social media, who they're hanging out with, what they do before or after school, all of that. Mm-hmm. And if you have a nosy parent, and I'll just say nosy, that's going to be the term I use. A nosy parent they're going to identify those things a lot quicker than somebody that is not consistently, trying to, I guess, be a part of their child's life or away from their child's life. A nosy parent's going to see things a lot quicker.
Doesn't matter if your kid gets mad at you, you could be saving their life or saving them, a future in jail.
Absolutely.
Who cares if your child's mad at you for a little bit for looking at what they're doing? I mean, care about them because, we're talking a lot about kids, but the adults too. I mean, the adults have been in this life for 10, 20 years by the time, some of them by the time they hit 30, they've been in it for, 10, 15 years. And so they are hardened and they show no emotion, and it's a hard life to get out of. And the adults are very dangerous as well. I know we're talking a lot about the youth, but we've got to remember, we've got an older generation that were the original groups of different gangs, and we've got to look out for, watch for them too, and keep an eye out, look who your kid's hanging out with, or in your neighborhood, check it out, be nosy, be that nosy neighbor.
Is there any programs or suggestions if someone has gotten to that life? How can we help them get out of it?
So I know, I don't know if y'all have any in Richmond County, Kyle, directly, but I know that there are programs across Georgia that I've heard about of helping kids just recognizing get out of life and giving them something to do. Put them in a youth center at least. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be a program, but give them something else to do. Kyle, I don't know if y'all have anything directly.
I mean, there's plenty of after school, before school programs around here, and I think that is a big thing. Idle hands. Idle hands always create problems, among youths, or can be a problem. Because if 3 kids are just hanging out every day just for the sake of hanging out,
They form their little hybrid gang.
Well, I mean, they're going to want to do something. They're going to get bored. They're going to want to do something. Not necessarily saying that's going to be the case every time, but there is in Richmond County a plethora of different programs, after-school programs. I mean, stuff at the Croc Center. I mean, there's churches have programs. There are programs out there. And after-school activities, things of that nature that kids can be doing instead of going and hanging out on the street corner with their friends, participating in criminal activity. There is, like I said, there is a multitude of programs out there. And I think people always preach, we need more programs, but why don't we use what we have right now? Because there is plenty out there. You just have to look for it. I mean, we've talked to some church groups and things like that. And I've talked to just people just regular citizens on the street, and they will tell me, well, there's this going on at this church, or there's this going on at this community center. There is other options out there. It just you gotta actually, as a parent, as a teacher, as an adult essentially that really wants to have some kind of effective decision making. If somebody is going to continue down a path of being in a criminal street gang, there are programs out there.
And that's what Judge Spencer talked about, and some of the representatives from DJJ have expressed that they have these programs available. Richmond County School System, they have a lot of programs available as well. They have a lot of grant funding as well. They have to be receptive to taking advantage of these programs, because as Judge Spencer had previously stated, some of the programs that they have, it's not until that juvenile is introduced into whether they're an unruly juvenile or they've committed some type of crime, and they're doing it as a diversion technique. But if you have a child that isn't tied up in DJJ yet, or they haven't committed a criminal act, but you see the behaviors, we have to, as a community, as well as starting with as parents, we have to find out what resources we have available, whether you're talking to the educators at the school, your churches, your community groups, as you said, and we have to make sure that as parents, we're accountable for where our children when they're not with us.
I think the other caveat to all that too is, we have to change the way we think about criminal street gangs and the philosophy. I think, that the community as a whole needs to essentially demonize criminal street gangs, to the point where it is not okay to be in a criminal street gang, and change that thought process among juveniles and, adults and that. It is not cool to be in a criminal street gang.
Right.
And while it's not illegal, it's still not okay.
Yeah.
Because it's going to lead. I've never, at least me personally, I don't know about everybody, but I've never seen somebody join a gang and it not lead somewhere bad for somebody else, or for themselves. And with those programs we were talking about too, they are for the kids, but make sure parents are looking out for them, because there are gangs out there that put on these back to school programs, or they put on these programs for the kids, and it's just a way of making us look like we're doing something good, but we're recruiting. So parents have to be mindful. Don't just send your kid without knowing where they're going and who's putting it on.
Right.
Because there are gangs out there that have made nonprofit type organizations, and that's so they can get to the kids. So be mindful of that, and those are the adults doing it.
I would have never thought about that at all.
Well, think about the Gangster Disciples.
Yeah.
Perfect example.
Growth and development.
Yeah.
But they are
Brothers of the struggle.
right. But they are, they're Gangster disciples by day, gangsters at night. They're selling money, shooting and stuff, but they're going to put on back to school programs for kids. But that's how they're recruiting. The kids are getting to know them. Oh, they're cool. They're nice. Let me get in with them. So parents have to be mindful of that, because these are adult men and women, helping try to recruit people into that life.
I mean, we've seen that in Richmond County too, and I won't identify him specifically, but he was asked to come to a school and talk about, life after, being a criminal street gang member. And they applauded this gentleman for going to this school and all that. And, you can look it up on social media, it's still there. But we arrested him recently and charged him with unlawful street gang activity, and weapons possession, drug possession again. And it is clear with the investigation, he is still a criminal street gang member, going to a school, talking to children. It's just insane to me. So teachers, I think, really need to vet who comes in and actually talk. Like, hey, is this guy still participating in, the life of a criminal street gang? And I know you say gangs as a whole. I like to refer to them as criminal street gangs.
Right.
Like I said, when I go back to that comment, we need to demonize criminal street gangs, because not every gang, like I said, it's not illegal to be in a gang.
Right.
Not every gang is going to be conducting criminal acts.
Right.
But as a community, we really need to make it to the point where it is not cool to be in a criminal street gang.
And I think that's why the statute has the word terrorism in it. Like I said earlier, it is a form of terrorism, and it is, if you read the first part of the statute, what the legislator says about the gangs, criminal street gangs in Georgia, it really hits hard, because it tells you just how much what they're trying to stop and the terrorism it is doing into the state of Georgia.
Now, you talked about people going into and recruiting, masking under this nonprofit, trying to help kids, and they're recruiting them. And you said in the beginning that your agency offers training for schools and things like that. How do we get in contact with your agency, or how do parents or teachers or educators get you into the schools and talk about this, and as opposed to people who are trying to recruit?
Right. Well, locally, they can reach out to me or my office and ask for the help, ask for us, and I'm happy to do it. I know there's other people in my office happy to do it, but across the state, you can reach out to the Attorney General's office or even your local law enforcement, and they can conduct the training too. I've done trainings with sheriff's offices, and Washington County went down to Emmanuel County and did a training for those teachers, and they also did with the school board. The sheriff's office and the school board have put on trainings for teachers, and they did it one afternoon after school was out, and I've seen it in Emmanuel, I've seen it in Washington, and I know they've done it. I'm sure they do it here too. I worked closer with them, being in a smaller community. I knew about it more. But they go and they teach, all the teachers go after school and they learn about how to identify, what to look for. And I know that's something the sheriff's office can help with too. Just reach out to your sheriff's office, wherever you're at. Reach out to the AG's office. Let us know. There's local DA's offices, because I did that when I was with the Middle Circuit DA's office. So we can help. Reach out to PAC. I mean, we can help. You just let us know you want us to come to you, and we'll help set something up with the school boards or the schools, individuals, whoever.
And you just recently did training with the Board of Education officers as well.
Yes, it was the gang unit, and then the Intel division also assisted us. So, and the training was actually pretty good for the BOE officers, and it was kind of comical because they were seeing a lot of this stuff. They just didn't kind of understand what it meant, and a lot of them are familiar. Like I said, with, we talked about, I think, simple things like emoji tagging on like social media, and groups of people and all that. And they had been seeing all these things. They just didn't know what it meant. So I think that really benefited them when we covered, because we just did a basic hybrid criminal street gangs, is what we kind of discussed, that were really kind of in the schools in the area and that. So it did benefit them greatly. I know I talked to a couple of them after the fact, and they were pretty appreciative of the training.
And having BOE officers is huge, because they can notice things too. They're with those kids every day in the school. I mean, I've seen videos of beatings that happen in schools or at high school football games in the bathrooms and stuff. So the BOE officers being trained is a huge thing, because they're in the school every day with these kids.
Okay. Well, we are going to wrap it up at this point. Is there anything that we have not discussed or that you want to convey to the parents, the community, about criminal street gangs?
I would just say, just really be part of your child's life, but be nosy in your child's life. Pay attention to everything that they are doing. Because a parent will see things a lot sooner than a teacher will, than we will, and that, other people in the community will. I mean, that's the best way, I believe, to actually stop, these criminal street gangs is with the parents, essentially.
And I would say, as a community, we cannot stand for it anymore. I know that they install fear, and I know that, we see it on our side. Witnesses don't want to testify because they're scared. But at some point, if we can all stand up and say no more, because the community you live in, that's your community, that's where you live, and you have to say no more. And if we can all together say no, we're not standing for this, it can take them down, it can disable them, it can make them weaken. But as a community, to protect yourselves and protect each other, we have to say no more.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. Hopefully, we'll have you back on at some point. But we appreciate you coming. And that's it for this.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.